week's episode of Berserk, Guts has officially embraced the darkness and rage within his heart as he prepares to go on a journey to save Casca, who has mysteriously disappeared, but not before reforging his massive sword, the Dragon Slayer, and donning some brand new badass black armor. We're also formally introduced to the psychotic Grand Inquisitor himself, Mozgus, and his posse of creepy-ass torturers. After last week's blood-spewing episode of Berserk, I think this episode right here was absolutely necessary. A somewhat slow episode, most of which is devoted to Guts returning to see his friends Rickert, Erica, and Goto, the man who forged the Dragon Slayer blade. Unfortunately, when he arrives, he learns that Casca has mysteriously disappeared, and that's because Erica decided to bring her out into the wilderness, and boom, she's gone. She feels really bad about it, and so does Guts. Guts goes as far as to actually realize that he's never going to be able to sleep at night for the rest of his life, as he's constantly being consumed by darkness, which takes the form of this demonic, hellish beast. This is what is known in the Berserk fanbase as the Beast of Darkness. Basically, it's Guts' inner evil taking on the form of this really creepy-ass looking hellhound. It's awesome, and I love that they're finally showing this in the series, because for people who read the manga, they know what this is going to mean much later in the series. Here's a hint. Berserker armor! Guts' reunion with Rickert is bittersweet to say the least, because this is when Guts finally realizes that he's allowed himself to become obsessed with his revenge. I mean, Rickert was a part of the Band of the Hawk. He saw all of this crazy shit going down, and lucky enough for him, he was able to avoid getting ready to go into that eclipse so that he could be devoured by countless apostles and demons. But he's managed to move on with his life, start a brand new career, and actually try to live like a normal person. This is something that Guts is just not going to be able to do, especially considering that he needs to save Casca, who is brain dead, walking around in the wilderness somewhere, and we don't even get to see her whereabouts until the end of this week's episode. And that's when we're finally introduced to Mozgus, who's going to be the first major villain of this season of Berserk, and this guy is just freaking great. Farnace and her team have been tasked with protecting the Grand Inquisitor and his caravan as they make their way to this city by the name of St. Albion. However, on the way they're ambushed by all of these refugees who are trying to get revenge against Mozgus, and that's when his guards just explode out of this carriage and start kicking all sorts of ass, and they all look so creepy. There's this one massive executioner who has this massive wheel, which he uses to just crush people. You have these two disgusting little imps who have these massive oversized saw blades, which they use like a scissor weapon. They get people trapped in between the blades and then cut them up completely. This one little imp-like guy who will jump on your face and rip your eyeballs out. There's also this other dude who happens to have this like weird bird-like mask, and he'll trap you with this like weird collar spear. And then, of course, there is Mozgus himself, who at first seems like kind of just your normal character, but no, there's a lot more to this creepy bastard than you can even possibly realize. Not to mention, he takes his job as an Inquisitor very seriously and really seems to relish in torturing those who go up against the Holy See or even the Church. And when I say torture, I mean he straight up fucks people up. There are two things they can do for people who go up against the Church or go up against them. They can burn them at the stake, which is already pretty freaking bad, or they can kill them by the wheel, which is they put these people down on these wooden blocks. The guy with the big wheel comes over, smashes their legs and their arms, then they twist their arms and legs around an actual wooden wheel, put them up on a pike on high so that the birds can eat the remains. It is freaking sick. Seeing the introduction of Mozgus and his group is really awesome, because not only is it incredibly disturbing, but it's also got this like level of dark comedy to it just for how over the top it is. Not to mention when Serpico actually sees these guys for the first time, he just can't help but want to put down his mask because he doesn't want to look at these guys directly. They're all just freakish monsters in their very own right. And Mozgus himself, despite the fact that he comes across as a very educated, articulate, and very calm person, he has this extreme tendency to just explode with anger, and his face just gets all veined up and nasty looking, and he takes this Bible and slams it on top of this guy's head, practically cracking his skull. Mozgus takes his job seriously. Nobody expects the Mozgus Inquisition! So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Berserk? Another really great episode of the series, which continues to have much better pacing and storytelling when compared to the first episode of the series. I'm convinced the first episode really turned a lot of people off, but if you can get past the fact that the first episode really wasn't all that great, that they've been skipping a few of the story arcs and even making up their own stories, this is still a pretty decent adaptation of Berserk. And this episode right here was probably one of the better ones that I've seen so far, and definitely showing the more emotional side of the series, especially Guts when he appears in this episode, just having to be reminded that some of his teammates are alive, Casca is gone, which Casca is kind of like the only thing that's keeping Guts sane at this point. Like, he's already a pretty insane person. Like, he is a berserker himself, but Casca is the one who is sort of keeping him in check and is a constant reminder of all of the terrible things that happened in his past. It was also really cool to finally see Rickert again, a much older version of the character that we've ever seen. It looks like he's definitely becoming a really competent blacksmith, even going as far as to making a new sword and actually creating this monument to the Band of the Hawk on this snowy hill by putting these swords all over the place. It's a really nice scene. You can tell that this definitely affects Guts at his core when he sees this in this episode. Then, of course, there's the return of Goto, who is a fantastic character. I love him in this episode because at first, it almost looks like he's on his deathbed, like he's really sick. He can't even, like, do anything in terms of, like, blacksmith anymore. But at the end of the episode, he decides that he's going to be the one who actually reforges the brand new Dragon Slayer sword, which is to say, he basically just smooths it out. But Guts also gets some brand new armor, which is a little different from what he had before. It's a little sharper, and you'll definitely get to see a lot more of that. That's basically his brand new default costume for the rest of the series, aside from one other piece of armor that I'm sure he's going to get later on, one that was implied in this episode, getting to see his inner darkness take the form of that, like, hellhound. Like, I love that scene. I'm like, finally, we're finally getting to see this part of the Berserk story told in anime form. It's fan-frickin-tastic. I love it. And, of course, there's the thing about Guts actually having to learn the lesson that he's never really going to be able to find peace unless he gets Casca and actually ends up killing all of these apostles. That's the only thing that's going to be able to appease him. All of that shit that he saw, his comrades being killed, Casca being raped by Griffith, all of it is burned into his eye, which has been ripped out. I love the imagery of him remembering all the flashbacks just to see the blood dripping down the screen as if it is actually going over his eyeball. It's little moments like that that add a lot of really great atmosphere to this series. And of course, there's the introduction of Mozgus and his torturers, who are definitely one of the craziest groups to be introduced in the series, and I cannot wait to see them in action. Trust me, they are going to be a lot of fun. The scene where they were killing people with a wheel, though, that was freaky in the manga. For some odd reason, it's like 10 times freakier in the anime version. Maybe it's all of the sound effects when their bodies are getting crushed and everything. It's just so fucking disgusting. It's crazy. But just like the rest of the Berserk series, both manga and anime and the brand new series, it is just metal as hell. And so was this week's fantastic episode of Berserk, which you should not miss. Now, not everybody's gonna love the CG animation, and it seems to be slightly toned down in this episode, but it's still there. But honestly, I'm used to it at this point, so I'm not gonna bitch about it in every episode. That's a stupid thing to do. What I will say is, as a Berserk fan, I'm enjoying this adaptation right here. The manga is going nowhere. If you ever really want to enjoy the series, read the manga. It's right there for you to enjoy. But if you are a fan of the Berserk manga series and you want to see more animated stuff, something that's going to really get you pumped up, then check out the brand new Berserk anime series. You're definitely going to see at least a couple of things that you like. I'm giving this episode right here a solid 4 out of 5. It certainly had some moments which were a little wonky in terms of the animation. Despite that, I think this was a pretty high-quality episode of this series, and it was a nice emotional episode, a nice build-up to this next arc. But if any of you guys did watch this week's episode of Berserk, please tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. Did any of you have a favorite scene from this episode? What did you think about the introduction of Mozgus and his torturing goons? What do you want to see from the Tower of Conviction arc and the rest of this brand new Berserk anime series? Please tell me in the comment section below. You guys are kick-ass! If you want to help support Super Kami Guru 9000, why don't you subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with all your friends. You guys know the sales pitch at this point. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.